goddamn get it on, will ya? Woo. When I blow up now, everybody's so unusual with it. Shit. But said times in his rhymes, cause his memories. We running through New York City.
Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can make your cooling system on your car last forever. Now I know this is a common problem, especially on a lot of BMWs, especially in the US, because obviously your climate is very different to other countries. You get a lot of heat, therefore you go through your cooling systems like no other. So I'm going to tell you and I'm going to show you what you need to look for and what you need to check to make the cooling system last forever and what needs replacing, especially on the BMW N52 engine. Okay guys, as you'll see here, this is the BMW N52 engine. Now, I know a lot of you guys suffer with overheating issues as well as cooling system issues on your BMW N52. So I'm going to go over all the things that need to be replaced and what will be causing your cooling issues on your BMW. Now this doesn't just apply to the BMW engine, this applies to all cars, and a lot of these cars are going to be different, a lot of them will be the same. So the first one will be your expansion tank right here. Now in the US I know they're prone to cracking, and that's because just like this car, it's been up to temperature, this gets very hot and these become very brittle because they're plastic from the heat and end up cracking and end up leaking the coolant. And that's the same on the M54, the same on the M57 engine. You have the coolant reservoir, which is here, as you guys would have seen on my diesel, and they end up cracking, and I've known them to crack. They've cracked on me and I've had to replace them previously. The next one on these that likes to fail, which will cause your cooling system to leak, and it's something that you're going to need to replace, it is this little water neck here that goes onto the block itself, and this goes back to the oil filter housing itself. Now they like to part perishing, as you see here, it's got a locked clip on it so that you can't remove, and they've got two bolts and they do come out, and then you've got to replace the water hose. Now it is a common problem, it ends up leaking and you end up finding coolant down the bottom here and going all the way down your block as well. Now that's something that needs to be replaced, and I advise doing that when you're going to replace the next part that I'm going to go on about right now, which is the electronic water pump. Now on the M52 and a lot of the new cars now, N53, N54, they use an electronic water pump which sits down there. You guys know where it is, a lot of you would have already replaced it. It sits right down there and it causes a lot of problems along with the thermostat. The thermostat's bolted to the water pump and they cause no end of issues. They do like to fail, the impellers like to fail, and a reason why the water pumps on these do fail a lot, which a lot of people ain't aware of, is because a lot of you change your coolant, bleed the system, and what you don't understand is air is trapped all inside the system once you bleed the system. The propeller is then running dry inside the water pump, which then ends up causing the water pump to fail. Therefore, that's why a lot of you guys who end up checking all your temperatures via the OBD and then thinking you've got a problem with the water pump and end up start bleeding your system for no reason, there is no need for that. These cars, yes, they run hot. I think the thermostats on them are designed to open at 110 Celsius, which is very hot. It's 3/4 on a normal car thermostat where the temperature gauge actually goes to. That's the reason why they never put it. These cars are designed to run hot and they do fluctuate based on driving style. A lot of you guys always message me asking that you're seeing it at this temperature and another temperature. It's normal, especially on these cars. And a lot of you panic thinking there's something wrong. There is nothing wrong. So please stop pressing down your accelerator trying to bleed the system. Do not do that. That is what knackers your water pumps. This car is still on 170,000 miles on its original water pump and still going strong still today. You guys have seen the mileage on this car. It's still kicking on original water pump and thermostat, and I'm very, very proud of this car, and it's done me well for the last 3 years without having to change it, and everyone is surprised when I tell them that it still hasn't been changed. Coolant is still fine. Like I said, that's another reason. Make sure you change your coolant on time as well on this car, but please remember the procedure on how to bleed it. Let the coolant get into the water pump, otherwise you're going to run it dry and it will burn the motor inside the water pump because it's not lubricated. The next one on these which causes your coolant losses is your oil filter housing. Now, as many of you guys know, the coolant comes through here, through the oil cooler, and it mixes through your oil filter housing. Now what ends up happening is as the coolant flows through to mix with the oil cooler itself, it ends up passing in the passages, and you end up seeing when this leaks, it will end up leaking down onto your block here. When the gasket's actually split, it leaks down onto your block and you end up noticing coolant as well as oil leaking down there. This is another common leak that I advise to make sure you go and fix if you have got that, or you're losing coolant, to check this, because this is very, very prone to people losing coolant or finding oil in their coolant as well, in the reservoir, from these two actually mixing, which they shouldn't be. The gasket is there to stop them actually mixing together on both sides, which is the oil filter housing and the oil cooler itself. Make sure to use genuine, because obviously you don't want to use a cheap Chinese £7 one, which isn't going to do the job, and then you're going to be back down there having to unloosen the bolts again, because as you guys know, the bolts are aluminium on here, so they will end up cross-threading them or breaking them, and then you're going to need new ones. You don't want to end up doing that into the housing itself. Therefore, make sure you do it once and once only. The next one on these is, as you'll see here, is your radiator. Make sure there's no crap inside your radiator on your car. A lot of people don't understand how important it is to not let a load of crap get on your radiator, i.e. leaves, hay, anything. If that gets clogged up, your car will overheat because it can't cool the car down. The radiator, obviously the coolant's flowing through it, at the same time keeping the car cool. When the radiator goes, it will cause your car to actually overheat. Make sure your fan is fully working as well, because the fan obviously it helps with cooling. A lot of you guys always ask me, why is my fan staying on? If your fan is staying on constantly, it means you've got a water pump failure. Your water pump's got on the way out. Therefore, your fan will stay on to keep the engine cool, because the water pump is not doing its job. Therefore, replace your water pump on your car, because without that, you will end up with overheating. And as you guys know, on the N52, on the E60s, it will put you in limp mode and not let you drive the car if you end up with your cooling system overheating. So make sure you check them things. The next one on these is all the radiator hoses. Now, I haven't actually changed my minds on, like I say, 170k and still on original radiator hoses. But in the US, that's not the case. I know a lot of you guys end up going through all your coolant hoses because they end up perishing over there or end up exploding due to the heat. And this is all because these engines already run hot. Then if you've got a black car, you know, heat attracts black, so therefore it goes onto the bonnet and produces even more heat in the engine bay. This is why a lot of you guys end up with the valve cover problems, as well as the CCV problems and everything else breaking in there because of the heat, because the engine's getting hotter than it's actually used to. But if you do get that, like I said, you guys need to replace all of them. And my best advice is, if you're going to replace everything for the reservoir, because this is not expensive anyway, as well as the water pump, you're better off to replace all the hoses as well. Now, the water pump thermostat, it's got a U-bend hose. Make sure you change that as well at the same time while you're down it. It doesn't make sense not to. They are prone to leaking and will leak, and will leave you that coolant. You might see it as a small amount, but every small amount that leaks from there is going to end up making you have to top up coolant, and you don't want to be running on a trip one day and it ends up exploding, losing all your coolant. So make sure you replace that U hose down there as well. Now, if you do have the M54 engine or the M57 engine, you will have the mechanical water pump, which sits down here with the clutch fan connected to it. As I told you, many of you, if you do have the clutch fan, make sure you keep it there, because that actually helps in aiding the cooling system. A lot of people don't like to believe me on that, and they want to listen to stupid people like Nathan, who wants to try and redesign German engineering. But I'm telling you the truth, them clutch fans work wonders. When you're sat at a standstill, when you're in park, the fan is constantly spinning. When you pull it in gear, the clutch will engage and it will let you drive. That's the whole purpose of the clutch fan. It engages and disengages and keeps the engine cool, and the fan does exactly what it's intended to do. Do not believe idiots who think they can come along and redesign German engineering on these cars, which the German engineers spent a lot of time, and you've got to remember, these guys were building planes before idiots on YouTube were trying to redesign German cars. So just take it as a matter of opinion. Do not believe someone who works in a shed. Take it from the German engineers. They put it there for a reason. It works as intended. Don't be lazy and don't be cheap. The reason people out them is because they don't want to replace the clutch fan, because they want to be cheap, and then they have to moan about a water pump going out every 60-70k, which should be replaced anyway. But they're trying to prolong the life of a water pump just to save on their pocket, which I think is very trampy, and you guys already know how I feel about that. If you do have the clutch fan, leave it in place. You guys saw, I always leave the clutch fan in place. The same for the M54. So there you have it, guys. Doing everything as I've just shown you on your BMW N52, M54, or on your M57 will help make your cooling system last actually forever. And like I said, this doesn't just apply for BMW, this applies to all cars, especially in hot climate countries, which are going to need their cooling system overhauled anyway. Just make sure to change your coolant regularly, and as I said, make sure the coolant is sitting in the water pump before you actually bleed it, especially on the electronic water pumps, because if they're running dry, you'll burn out the motor because they're not lubricated, and therefore you end up needing a new water pump. When BMW designed these cars, they designed them to the point thinking that you would never have to change your water pump again. That's why they put it separate from the engine, and that's why they made it electric, because it had a better life than a mechanical one. And you know what, A lot of people have gone 200, 250,000 miles without having to replace their water pump and gone the whole life of the car. A lot of people do actually moan about it, but it's because of people playing about the water pump, thinking they have to keep bleeding, doing a bleed procedure to actually make their cooling system a lot better. And it's not going to make your cooling system better. It's not going to make your car come under 110 Celsius. These thermostats are designed to open high, and it's something you have to deal with. If you don't want a car that opens at that temperature, well, get rid of it. It's all there for emission related purposes and to make these cars run at the power they actually do. And this engine was developed for that reason. This is why it's a magnesium block, and they can run hotter than older engines. So I hope this actually clears up a lot of the issues. I get asked this every single day about cooling problems on the BMW N52 and all other cars as well. Thank you very much for watching. This BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.